everyone, and welcome to Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. My name is Brandon Adams. This is Dog Nation's recruiting insider, Jeff Sintel, and you can tell, even before the show, he is busy packing away here. It is that time of year for you, my friend, the time when you take center stage, and a lot of these 2019 recruits will finalize their process. They will put pen to paper and put the ink on national letters of intent. We are not too far away from that indeed happening. Early signing period now just 2 weeks away, am I right about that? We're certainly getting close one way or another. It's going to be here before you know it. And Jeff, you're all over all of it. We appreciate you breaking away from your hard work in covering the recruiting angle to bring us some of that information here on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger today.
First thing I'll say is, number one, it feels like you can never write enough, you can never put enough on the message board. You want to just, when I'm writing a story, and I'm like, I just want to slide that in somewhere in a portion or a section of the story because there's just so much going on right now.
All right, so we'll obviously do our part to cover here on Before the Hedges later on today on our program. We'll talk more in detail about Jaden Hazelwood, some curious things that Hazelwood had to say to Jeff Sintel. We'll talk about that coming up on our program today. Also, the big day approaches, commitment date on Monday for five-star offensive lineman Clay Webb. We've got new details on that decision we'll give to you, and we'll kind of get into the likelihood that Webb does indeed choose Georgia when he makes his choice on Monday. So all that's coming up. But here on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger, let's also dive into some big news. Late breaking here at the moment. You'll see this at dognation.com even today. But Bill Norton, Jeff, is a four-star defensive lineman, a guy that I guess the recruiting services kind of list as a defensive end, but the odds are at Georgia, he'd probably slide over and play like inside and play more like a three technique or something like that probably with the Bulldogs program. But there is also, and a lot of us this time of year are all the same way, we got our ear to the ground trying to see what the rumor mill, message board chatter is. There has been a lot of rumors about Bill Norton out there. So I want you to kind of give us the latest on Norton. We'll see Norton in his own words here in just a moment. But can you kind of address, for the people who maybe don't follow this quite as closely, what the rumors in regarding this UGA commit Bill Norton have been and why what we're about to hear from Norton is so significant?
Well, I guess the main thing, and keeping it the main thing, is that there's been a lot of things. Like, it's a situation with Norton where Jeremy Pruitt had kind of targeted him, and he is a hyper-aggressive recruiter, a great recruiter. Norton is seen as the number one player in Tennessee. He's about 6'6", about 280, from Christian Brothers. He committed to Georgia back in March, and he'd been thinking about Georgia for quite some time. And I don't exactly know where it comes from, but we're getting questions on the message board. People are wondering. The spots are always going to be at a premium in the class at Georgia. And even, I've been in touch with Norton a long time. I've been writing about him for forever, it feels like, the way he wants to suplex people, and it gets guys like this guy really jazzed up.
Y'all know I love pro wrestling.
About the way he plays. And, Norton plays a premium position. I think, he's seen as a strong side defensive end, but at 6'6", 280, he's likely going to be a 5 or maybe even a 3 technique at some pass rush situations, most likely maybe in a 5 at the college level. But he's got a really tight relationship with Coach Scott. Most folks have been asking me, they've been wondering about Norton's spot in the class. Norton told me this week that he had some assurances from Georgia. He feels very confident. He had a very good meeting with Trey Scott earlier this week, and he tells me he's going to be at Georgia this fall. So I think the main manner that we're reporting here is just that Norton, kind of like the title says below, Norton has got some assurances from Georgia that he will very likely be a Bulldog.
Well, in fact, let me show you the quote that Jeff Sintel was able to get from Bill Norton. This is very late-breaking stuff. This is stuff that you'll read at dognation.com today, but we'll also give you a chance to sort of get this conversation started on Before the Hedges here also. Here is Bill Norton and what he told Jeff Sintel. Let me show you this on the screen. He says, "I'm going to Georgia next year. That's completely final." And those words from Norton would seem to put to any of that speculation. You talked about it. It's been a hot topic on the forum at forum.dognation.com, and I don't think any of that kind of questioning of Norton's status in this class has anything to do with the evaluation of Norton as a player. I think that virtually anyone who's seen Norton play would tell you that he's a top-flight player. I think, though, that the theme that we have mentioned a lot for this Georgia 2019 class is this isn't, to a certain degree, at least with these available roster spots that are still left in this class, this is a best player available type situation where it's not Norton being compared to other defensive linemen. It's maybe Norton being compared to any other player that's on the board available regardless of position. So from that standpoint, maybe that's the genesis of a lot of this speculation. But that quote that you get from Norton would seem to put a lot of that to bed.
Yeah, so the things that, Norton, even in the story, I think it's probably live right now on dognation.com, but the thing that Norton even addressed that he'd been hearing some things that Georgia might be iffy with him, and, that's very, number one, for Norton to discuss that thing, he just wanted to get some reassurances, and he said he's spoken about that with Coach Trey Scott. He calls him Coach Trey all the time. Scott's done a very good job from the jump with Bill Norton, and he's got some assurances that Georgia still values him in the class. He's going to take his official visit this weekend. He's not going to take any other official visits, he tells me. And the timing of it, people will wonder, why not the next weekend, yada, yada, yada. He's been planning this official visit this weekend to Georgia for months now. At least I can remember talking to him about it in early November about it. And the thing there is he's gotten the assurances. He says he trusts Coach Scott.
Yeah.
The thing that is, if you kind of put things together, Norton's not an early enrollee. He's going to show up in May. He really wants to sign with Georgia on the 19th, and he tells me he will sign with Georgia on the 19th. And it's very interesting with the timing of things because Coach Trey Scott came to see him this week, and Norton told me he felt very good about the way things went with that meeting. And then coming out of that, he does plan to sign with Georgia on the 19th. So a lot of folks have been watching Norton. I think a lot of folks think he's one of the more popular commitments in the class. Every time he comes away from Georgia, I guess he kind of feels like this guy does, or he feels like a lot of Bulldog fans do. When he gets in the car and he points the car in the opposite direction of Athens, he doesn't want to leave. He wants to stay. He's already so ready to be in Athens. And I kind of think back to a quote Kirby Smart had at a press conference earlier this year where he said he wants guys that want to be at Georgia. And Bill Norton, to me, sounds very much like a guy who really wants to be at Georgia.
Well, an example of just how much Bill Norton apparently does want to be at Georgia. Here is what he recently told you about his love for the program. And if you're a Georgia fan, you want guys, as Jeff said, much the same way that Kirby Smart has talked about that desire to be a part of this program. Norton's desire for Georgia is so strong that he doesn't have any desire to even look around anywhere else. Here's a pretty powerful statement from Norton about just how strongly he feels that UGA is the right college home for him. Here's Bill Norton with Jeff Sentell.
Yeah, I'm not even super interested in leaving anywhere else. Because I already know I'm not decommitting and I'm not changing my decision. Because committing to Georgia was the best decision I've made. So. And I have never had a single doubt about changing it, so I don't really see a huge point in visiting anywhere else.
So that's Bill Norton right there talking about how strongly he feels about Georgia. Chris Pope in our Facebook comment section says one of the things that Georgia's got to do is work on make sure it holds on to the current commits that it has, at least in the case of Bill Norton. Obviously, given what he said there, the trip the Georgia coaches take up to see him here this week is not an example of them trying to make sure that he's not wandering in the direction of Jeremy Pruitt. It is clearly a little bit more about okay, let's go ahead and get all this finalized and locked down, because clearly Norton right there, those words would indicate that he doesn't seem to have much of a wandering eye.
Yeah, and I think, that obviously he's the number one player in Tennessee, and that would be a feather in the cap for Jeremy Pruitt to sign the number one player in his state, much less what he's doing with guys like Wanye Morris and Owen Popo. But to me, I think it was important, and sometimes there's the stories that you really don't like to report, or sometimes the stories that don't have happy endings. The fact that Norton had that meeting with Trey Scott and came away feeling very good about his thoughts with Georgia, he's just going to take the official visit, no more visits, and that he plans to sign with Georgia on the 19th. I think that are some good things going forward with Georgia and Bill Norton.
Georgia Peach on YouTube was asking about some of those 2020 recent decommitments from Ohio State. We're going to talk about some of that later on in our program today. Charles Kaiser asking about Clay Webb. Charles, we will talk a lot about Clay Webb before we're done here on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger today. Let me, though, transition for right now on the subject of 2019 Georgia defensive linemen to move from what Bill Norton had to tell you to also to Zion Logue here, another UGA defensive line commit who kind of drops his own news there as well. Logue is a guy, I think you would agree, Jeff, whose stock in the recruiting rankings, I don't know if the rankings themselves have been rising, but there's no doubt that Logue's stock has been rising. At one point in time, I think he was one of the more, less heralded of Georgia's 2019 commits, but now that's a guy that the Georgia coaches seem to really putting their faith and stock in. Other programs have been interested in Logue, but let me show you the quote here once again on the screen of what you've gotten from Zion Logue. Also an example of a recruitment apparently being shut down. Zion Logue tells you, "I've told my other schools in the loop, I'm done." Now, you can't get more closed book than that. Logue apparently closing off all the other potential suitors for his services. What do you make of that news from Zion Logue?
Yeah, and he's again another guy. He's going to take his official visit next weekend, which is I don't know, I guess we're just going to call it closers weekend or something like that. He's a guy that you hear a lot of times with recruits, if they are not happy with their offers and they want to change their offers, they need to change their body. And what Zion Logue did over the last 12 months or even 8 to 10 months is he put on about 40 pounds. He maintained the same way he covers ground. He has a high work rate, a good motor. He has some good senior film, and what he's done is he's elevated his stock considerably. Lots of schools were on him, not just Tennessee, but of course Ole Miss liked him. But even schools like Ohio State and Georgia.
Yeah.
Georgia got involved, and Zion Logue. Everybody wants to wonder. Maybe a vogue question we're going to start hearing is, Jeff or guys, who could be the Jordan Davis of this year's class? Who could be that big body that would help out on the front, but also is a guy that's maybe only the 3-star guy that could really do a great thing like Jordan Davis has in the Georgia defensive front. And I think Zion Logue could be one of those guys.
Well, I think that's really interesting. And Steve Highland also brings it up in our Facebook comment section as well, that Georgia needs, in addition to Jordan Davis, another one of those nose guard style defensive linemen. But Logue's only about 280 pounds, though. I mean, is he really a guy that's going to be able to do for Georgia what Jordan Davis has done this year?
Well, I mean, his weight kind of goes up 280, 290, but I get what you're saying. Jordan Davis was a massive guy. Yeah. This guy might actually be just as big as Jordan Davis as well. Out of Lebanon, Tennessee, that's a suburb of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, that sort of area. He's a guy that says he's done, and he's another guy that Georgia has to build up that front, has to get a heavy kind of a heavy guard, a heavy roll call of defensive linemen in this class. There's Timon Mitchell, there's Travon Walker, there's Zion Logue, there's also Bill Norton as well on that defensive line front. Georgia needs to go heavy on the DL in this cycle.
So a couple of very complimentary statements about Logue in our Facebook comment section. Philip Jordan Wells saying that he thinks that Logue will be a composite 4-star by the time the final ratings come out, and it wouldn't surprise me if that's also true. Zach Smith also says that he's seen a lot of Logue on film, and he likes what he brings to the table. So that's an example of something that you're hearing from Georgia fans now. I don't think you were hearing a couple of months ago, and I do think you're right, Jeff. Part of that is the fact they've seen the impact that Jordan Davis has made as a freshman and say, what do you get yourself some more of those? Maybe Zion Logue has a chance to be that. But it's also, I think, speaking to what kind of senior season Logue has had for himself there in Lebanon, Tennessee.
Yeah, great film, and he's one of those guys that you sit there and wonder, I don't know, he probably could jump up into maybe a composite 4-star. The way the composite works now, if one rating service, because there's just 3 now, there's ESPN, there's 24/7 Sports, and there's Rivals, and if one rating service gets a good batch and finally a good eval on a senior prospect, they can see their ratings kind of go up maybe 20%.
Crow King 123 on YouTube says when it comes to Jordan Davis, Crow King says the bet is for him on Timon Mitchell more so than Zion Logue. With no disrespect to Logue, I guess Timon Mitchell is the one that I do see more easily following in those Jordan Davis footsteps. Mitchell seems to me the more apt comparison to Jordan Davis. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, Mitchell's more the traditional nose. Mitchell's about not as big as Zion, not as big as Jordan. Mitchell only goes about 6'3.5", which is still a very large human being. About 315 or so. More of a traditional nose guard, defensive tackle. Zero technique possibly. Georgia's still seeking to really, I think, to find more guys like John Atkins, not just Jordan Davis in that front, because if you look at that football game that was played on Saturday, that football game that shall not be named, maybe for a while on Dog Nation,
it's been a rough one.
A couple more Jordan Davises would have helped, especially when Alabama couldn't throw the ball, and then Alabama found first downs and moved the chains through A gap and B gap with a guy like Josh Jacobs.
That is Jeff Sintel, Dog Nation's recruiting insider. My name is Brandon Adams. Welcome into Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. By the way, speaking of Kroger, they've got a great offer right now that I want you to take advantage of. Did you know you can get 3 times the fuel points when you buy select meat and seafood like pork back ribs and Kroger shrimp at your local Atlanta Kroger? You can download the coupon in the Kroger app and you can start saving today. All right, here on our program, let's transition and let's get into Jaden Hazelwood, because obviously wherever you go and talk to other Georgia fans over the last couple of days, to the extent that the Georgia-Alabama game has dominated conversation, one of the next biggest conversations that I've heard Georgia fans having is around Jaden Hazelwood and what Hazelwood told you in a piece that was published off at dognation.com coming off the weekend. The fact that Hazelwood and his team's playoff game down in South Georgia, which had used its in-home visit on Hazelwood earlier in the week, not present. Miami and Florida State were, and those 2 schools were heavily on Hazelwood's mind when he spoke to you at Dog Nation. Here is the quote for the people who may have missed the Intel at dognation.com. But if you did miss it, I got to have you go check this out. This is a very deep, detailed look at where Hazelwood's recruitment stands in his own mind right now. Here's the quote that matters, though. Hazelwood, in terms of his leaders or in terms of the schools he's most strongly considering, says, "Did you see who's at this game tonight? Did you see? Look around. That should tell it all." That's a reference to, as you point out, Miami had coaches there, Florida State had coaches there. That would seem to be who Hazelwood is referencing right here, and that's not a reference to Georgia. Jeff, you were a part of this conversation. That's a one-on-one exchange between you and Jaden. Give us your thoughts on how you received this information as a guy who's transcribing all of this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, and lots of people, it seems like every time we write things about Jaden Hazelwood, it opens eyes, or people have very, very powerful reactions to it. And this is a guy, everybody wants me to kind of put these, encompassing statements, the big picture statements regarding Hazelwood. And I simply feel that, number one, this is a player who I feel is uncertain. This is also a player who I feel is worth everything that the coverage, maybe sharing some of his opinions about. This is a player that I'm going to challenge folks that are maybe forming distinct impressions about Jaden Hazelwood to think to yourself, if that guy goes to Georgia, every time he makes a big play, are they going to say, man, worth all the trouble?
Yeah.
Man, I mean, that Jaden Hazelwood, that gave Dog Nation a coronary and ulcer. It gave this man that potential gray hair way back there.
All this stuff right here, I had as nice and brown hair before Jaden Hazelwood's recruitment started. Now look how gray it is. I blame Jaden for that. Obviously, I'm kidding.
But so I still think Georgia is in it. I think Georgia has always been a central figure in Jaden's life. I can remember him telling me he was a Georgia fan before he got the Georgia offer. When we start looking at things, Georgia is the one school that is kind of held serve in terms of its momentum. Or, Miami's lost some games. Miami's lost some recruits. Florida State is in clear rebuilding mode.
Yeah.
Auburn is a program with the news from Kelly Bryant not getting a lot of good momentum, and especially with some of the reports coming out there, or some of the thinking coming out, some of the innuendo coming out about how secure is Owen Pappoe to that class of 2019 in Auburn as well. So I think lots of people clearly form opinions about Jaden. All I'm going to say is he's a guy that is definitely one that is worth the coverage, the attention. This is a special football player, and you might be thinking the same vein you do as Roquan Smith, with all of the moves and his thought process as he comes closer to his decision. One thing that it'll probably come up on the site soon is I think I don't know. Lots of people think, I'm going to figure out the Jaden Hazelwood situation because I'm going to see what happens on December the 19th, and they're going to see Florida State take 3 receivers, or Miami take 3 receivers, or extra
I have certainly
receivers.
thought that it was going to be very hard, and I'll let you finish your point, but just to give some context, I have definitely thought for these guys that plan on waiting to January to make an announcement about being an early enrollee, that there's a really good chance that the December signing period spoils their surprise. Programs they don't choose aren't going to preserve the surprise for them, and just the overall movement of players could sort of render another school with no spots left, which obviously would eliminate that school for contention, not just for Hazelwood, but potentially for a guy like Tyreek Stevenson as well.
Yeah, that's something some people will start thinking and wondering, and they'll look, 4D chess is a lot of people like to say on the forum about the way Georgia goes about his recruiting. They're playing 4D chess while everybody else is playing checkers. But what seems like to me is that situation, there's lots of ways he can handle that. He can sign with multiple schools. He can sign the financial aid forms. He could decide not to do anything. He could decide to just wait and make his decision when he makes his decision. He's going to be at the Army All-American Bowl, and that decision will come out. Excuse me, I get so used to saying it. It's the former Army All-American Bowl, and now it's known as the All-American Game, or All-American Bowl, I believe. And that will take place on January the 5th in San Antonio, Texas.
So Andre Harris had a good comment in our Facebook comment section. He says, some of y'all that get so mad at Hazelwood act like this is your first time covering recruiting or following recruiting. And I kind of agree with Andre on that. That is this at times excessively dramatic? Maybe so. But it is not among the most dramatic recruitments we've ever seen, really, for anybody. And, you know, for someone like me, now you do this for a living, when it comes to the recruiting part of this, I, for the most part, choose to consume it as a fan, although I do cover it, I guess, on shows like this. But this is the deal that I make with myself. If I want to care where these 17, 18-year-old kids go, if that's a choice that I want to make, and as a fan and as a media member, that's what I've chosen to care about, then I've got to also be okay with a certain degree of drama. So when I read your piece at dognation.com, it's good reporting from you, it's honest thoughts from Jaden Hazelwood, and yet there is still a part of me as the adult in the room who, much like Ron Burgundy, says, I don't believe you. And this is like Ron Burgundy.gif thing of, I don't believe you when you say that, hey, I'm going to go to Florida State or Miami for whatever reason. These programs are middling at best right now. That's not where you're going to go. But does Hazelwood currently know that's not where he's going to go? He may not. He may believe at the time that he says it, but there is still a part of me that's going to disregard that portion of the drama, that this is just Hazelwood feeling a certain way in the moment, or as the kids say, a certain kind of way, a type of way. How would they say that?
Some type of way.
Some type of way.
I would say, you know, I think that the last story we wrote, I think it went up on Monday, was I would say that Georgia, it seems to me Georgia still has some work to do with Jaden Hazelwood.
And I believe that's a good characterization of how I assume it probably goes. Now, you know the inside part of this more than I do, but when I think about how I assume that it's probably going, I think that headline characterizes my assumption of the scenario pretty well. I don't think it's a done deal, Hazelwood to Georgia. I just think that's where he ultimately lands.
So, and maybe those things still need to happen, but what I tried to do, you know, in my efforts there as a reporter, is I wanted to present it like, okay, this young man still seems like he's uncertain. Florida State and Miami are rising up. They are showing how much they value Jaden Hazelwood. They're showing up at his games, and I hope everybody, when they read that story, they realized that Georgia had already taken its in-home visit earlier that week. Yeah. Georgia was also playing a fairly significant game on Saturday, less than 12 hours later, or 16 hours later than Cedar Grove's state semifinal playoff game. It just, to me, when I try to convey my reporting, I try to be as accurate as I can, and I try to say that it sounds like Georgia still has some work to do with Jaden Hazelwood.
Drew Stevens in our Facebook comment section says, I'm not worried about Hazelwood because we got Dominic Blaylock. Y'all, I love Dominic Blaylock. I love his senior film. Every time I've seen him on TV, he's been on TV like 4 times this year. I love everything that Blaylock brings to the table. As a prospect, Hazelwood's a better prospect. You know, if he ends up going somewhere else, I'm going to get super disappointed. I want them to have both of them. Georgia would have a less of a class if Dominic Blaylock was not a part of it. Hazelwood's a better prospect than Dominic Blaylock.
Oh, the ratings clearly say that. And I mean, he's a guy that's rated that highly for a reason as the nation's #1 receiver. But, you know, I'm going to say 2 things. Number one, you know, I could have, if I was writing for, my coverage platform was Florida State football, it would be Florida State still has some work to do with Jaden Hazelwood. Miami still has some work to do with Jaden Hazelwood if my address was in the 305.
And then if I was a commenter to that Florida State blog, I'd say, how about you work on getting bowl eligible, then you can work on Jaden Hazelwood.
But the point you make there, and I don't think that's the way the opponent, and I'm going to call them the opponent for this fan base. The guy in the other corner, guy in that arena that Georgia's going to deal with, you think Alabama fans sit there and they go, Jerry Jeudy, Devonta Ruggs, Devonta Smith, Henry Ruggs, Jalen Waddle.
Yeah.
They want them all. They've got 4 of them.
That's right.
And
that's right.
That's what makes Jerry Jeudy so effective and Devonta Smith so effective and Henry Ruggs so effective and Jalen Waddle so effective. It's not the question of, Blaylock over Hazelwood or Hazelwood over Blaylock. It's the question of Blaylock, Hazelwood, plus Jeremiah Holloman, plus another guy. Because that's what you're competing with. You don't need 1 5-star or 2 5-stars. I just ripped off several 5-stars there for Alabama, and that's who Georgia is still chasing.
All right, coming up in a moment, I want to try to answer one of the questions that's been out there in terms of Hazelwood would be an early enrollee to Georgia where he signed. Who are some of those other early enrollees potentially for Georgia? We'll show you that in a moment. Let me do one more thing on Jaden Hazelwood before we get there, though. Jeff, we've kind of kicked around this idea of how Hazelwood views Georgia for quite some time, especially when it comes to his view of the offense. An offense that really moved the ball through the air, at least for the first 2.5 quarters against Alabama on Saturday. Let's go back to some recent comments from Hazelwood to you. He really said this to you almost verbatim in 2 different conversations. Help us separate fact from fiction on the true view from Hazelwood about this Georgia offense. Here's a reminder of Hazelwood's somewhat tepid, lukewarm feelings about how much Georgia's been throwing the ball and how much he's even paying attention to UGA at the moment. Here's Hazelwood from back in November.
Have you been paying attention to the state school throwing the ball around a little more? How do you feel about what Georgia's doing? How do you feel about that fit right
they've
now?
been throwing it a little bit more. I ain't really been watching them, but I've been seeing stuff on Twitter, so that's really it.
What about Justin? Did you see his highlights?
He threw a bomb to Miko, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that.
What's left for you and them? What do you need to see? Like if you were going to take the official this weekend, what would that have
I
done
just
for
want to
you?
see how everybody getting used. Everybody got a way of being used, so I'm trying to compare myself to a receiver they have and see how he getting used.
So you wrote about this, and I thought it was a really interesting look at the SEC championship. At least I think it was you that wrote this. About all the different receivers that touched the ball for Georgia against Alabama, but nobody had anywhere close to 100 yards receiving.
Sure.
I mean, how does Jaden Hazelwood look at that? I mean, you couldn't throw the ball much better than Fromm did on Saturday, but there was no comp to Hazelwood on the field because it's hard to have as much talent as Hazelwood has. I mean, if you had to guess, what are his true feelings with the Georgia offense right now?
I think he notices that Georgia's throwing the ball more, and here's what I think needs to happen. And you know, like these are my thoughts, guys, but like the work to do with Jaden Hazelwood. Here's what I think is the work. I think Georgia needs to get him in front of the film on his official visit, and they need to show, here's how we would have used you against Alabama. Here's how we would use all our receivers against Alabama. But, you know, the point I made coming out of that Alabama game is, one, Georgia threw the ball 39 times. So that's a good blueprint about how Georgia feels it needs to beat Alabama. How Georgia needs to go about beating Alabama. They threw the ball 39 times, and they ran the ball 39 times. So that is a 50-50 split. Most of the time, I think Georgia is more 65-35 in the Kirby Smart era. So that's a really good blueprint to say we need to be balanced when we go against the biggest, baddest team program in the land. And there's an example of that. The other thing I saw in that game film was Fromm had to feed the ball to DeAndre Swift. I think he had 6 catches. Or I think Nada had 6 catches. I think DeAndre Swift had 4. Riley Ridley also had 4, but Georgia didn't have a single receiver with more than 48 yards. That to me just says in that matchup, they needed to find more work. They needed to find more success moving the ball downfield with the current lineup they have. And then also with Georgia, the other thing they can say is Riley Ridley going to move on? Is McCole Hardman going to test draft waters? Terry Godwin's graduating. Jason Stanley is graduating. So there's going to be some openings. We wrote in that recent piece, you know, Jaden Hazelwood guys could care a lick about who's in the way, who's in the depth chart. Don't have to promise that dude anything. He made one point clearly to me is he says, I need opportunities. All I want is the opportunities. And guys, you may not like some of the things he says because he says something about Florida State. He says something about the passing game. He says something about the ball in the air. But one of the things he said to me, and he absolutely owns, is he says, all I want is a shot. Give me a shot to get some playing time. And if I got a shot and I'm not playing, then that's on me. That's my problem. That's all he's looking for is an opportunity to get on the field, to help his team. Because, guys, this young man clearly cares about winning, about performing on the big stage, and helping his team win big games. That's exactly what he's done for 3 seasons now at Cedar Grove.
Darnell Ballard in our Facebook comment section says, what about the other 5-star kind of on the board for right now? What about Clay Webb? We'll have an update on Webb coming up in a moment here on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. Before that, though, we've been asked about early enrollees, the potential signees who could be early enrollees in Georgia. Obviously, that's a population that has a chance to get on the field very soon their freshman year. So let's take a look at this graphic right now, which will give us a sense of some of those guys, were they to sign with Georgia, that would be early enrollees. One of those guys is Jaden Hazelwood. Also, Lewis Seen, who I thought gave some very provocative quotes to you in the aftermath of the SEC Championship on Saturday. You see DJ Daniel. We'll hear about Daniel later on in our program. There's news about Ryan Davis we need to address. Rylan Godey, the tight end, Jermaine Johnson, Warren McClendon, Tresman Marshall, Nolan Smith. Jeff, when you look at these potential early enrollees, kind of what jumps out at you, and just kind of how do you quantify a lot of what we just saw there?
A lot of them. If Georgia goes through and hits 80% of those names, 90% of those names, it's going to be a lot of slots that need to be open in January for them to welcome all of them into the program. And that just shows, another infusion of talent coming into the program. And I think people are wise to look at early enrollee chart and then think about the graduating senior slots. I think there's some uncertainty there whether Michael Chigbu is currently still on scholarship in terms of a senior class or an expiring scholarship slot. But to me, looks like there are either 15 or 16 scholarship slots that will come open regardless of any NFL jumps, regardless of any program attrition. So you got to remember, you got to stay under 85, and really, Georgia can only create enough signees in the 2019 class as they have room for.
When you see a name like Nolan Smith on there, a name like Hazelwood, given their status as recruits, given that ability to kind of work their way into a program, especially in Nolan Smith's case, Smith starts to feel like one of those guys that could be, for a Georgia pass rush that needs some extra bodies. Now, when DeAndre Walker was healthy on Saturday, they got after Tua Tagovailoa pretty good, but that was not a consistent part of Georgia's defense this season. To think that Smith could show up in January after getting good training and good development at IMG Academy and sort of pass the baton to his time there at Georgia, Smith, of any name on this list, maybe Jermaine Johnson a bit too, just given the fact that he's a junior college guy, but it's Smith and Johnson that, to me, feel like the two guys would make the biggest early impact. I guess beyond that, I may, go Lewis Cine, but certainly Smith and Johnson jump out to me first in terms of guys that could be playing right away.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys where, everybody's going to wonder, Tresman Marshall, it seems like Georgia has reached back out to him. They've made a visit to see him this week. Georgia's showing, and let's face it, we talk about this term a lot. If we had a Dog Nation Before the Hedges t-shirt, it might say something like follow the visits on it or something like that. And really, the coaches show the guys that carry the biggest favor right now by the visits they make after the SEC championship game in Georgia's case and before the early signing period, before the dead period arrives. They want to make sure Georgia locks down its guys, that they know that those guys are going to be in the class before they start wondering about, how about this guy? How about this guy? Do we have room for this guy?
Yeah.
I think that's what's taking place right now.
Frank DeCarlo in our Facebook comment section said that list of potential early enrollees is ridiculous. In terms of the overall talent, that's a pretty impressive group there. I think Frank's right about that. Now, another guy that could be maybe joining Georgia pretty soon here, although we'll have to wait and find out about all of that, is the five-star offensive lineman Clay Webb, who is set to make his announcement on Monday. I asked you on Dog Nation Daily yesterday if we knew when that was going to go down for Clay Webb. We don't know, at the time at least we didn't know that, but we do have new information. You've spoken to the Clay Webb camp here today. Jeff, what can you tell us about when on Monday the five-star offensive lineman will announce his choice between Alabama, Clemson, and Georgia, if I've got the top three correct there?
Yeah, Auburn probably might have a hat on the table, but I don't know if Clay seems like a hat guy to me at all. He might just stand up and tell people where he's going. 10 a.m. it's Central Time, so it's 11 a.m. Dog Nation Daily Time over here in the 770 and 404 area code. It's going to be from the Performing Arts Center in Oxford High School, and I think the 10 a.m. Central, I'm going to give credit. 24/7 was the first media outlet to report that earlier today. I also reached out to a source I have, and they said that's indeed going to be the case, 10 a.m. So everybody's wondering, hey, Jeff, we kind of popped this up on the forum a little bit. Hey, Jeff, I need something to get me through Christmas or get me through early signing day. What are the key dates to look for in Georgia recruiting? The first one of those is December the 10th.
So we will on Monday, December 10th, have a Before the Hedges recruiting special that morning at 11 a.m. What we'll essentially do, for those of you that watch a lot of our programming, we'll do Dog Nation Daily, its normal time, and kind of roll, right on through there and do a regular show. We'll go off the air briefly. We'll come back on the air at 11 a.m. and we'll do a live Before the Hedges presented by Kroger coverage of the five-star offensive lineman Clay Webb's decision. And Jeff, for me, even though Smart Money for a while have said this was kind of a Georgia-Clemson battle, there is a part of me that does look forward to making this a little bit of revenge, retribution against Alabama. I mean, Alabama, credit where credit's due, got the win on the field on Saturday against Georgia. But I would not mind the idea of Georgia now getting this win over Alabama recruiting, because my understanding is Alabama's trying to make a late push for Webb. I'd love to see Georgia get that win in recruiting a 5-star offensive lineman from the Yellowhammer State. I would not mind that at all.
So Clay Webb, the thing with Clemson and Alabama, the things when I speak to him, he says Clemson has a family feel for him. He says that Clemson actually has a former Oxford High coach on their staff there. That creates a lot of affinity. He really likes the way that the Tigers relate to their players and their players relate back to the staff. Let's face it, Dabo Swinney and his staff do a great job in terms of making everybody feel a part of something at Clemson, and that's not just going down the slide. Alabama, every time he talks to me about Alabama, he tells me about how he loves the strength staff. He loves how he would be developed. He loves the thought of just jumping in that weight room and just grinding and getting better and getting pushed and getting broken and then getting built back up by Scotty Cochran. Again, that's something that Alabama has done extremely well for about 12, 13 years now. And then with Georgia, a lot of his thoughts come back to Sam Pittman. Especially Sam Pittman. He told me that, Clay Webb told me recently that whatever his decision is going to be, it's going to be excruciating. He used the word excruciating to describe how tough it's going to be to tell Auburn no, to tell Alabama no, to tell Georgia no, to tell Clemson no, out of all those possible suitors. And he's a guy, he's just a different recruit. Doesn't want to take visits, doesn't want to indebt a school or feel like he would be wasting someone's time on an official visit dime. I think he's got everything he's needed to make his decision. I think he's had that for quite some time. And all I can say to me is I kind of feel like a country doctor sometimes when I talk to Clay Webb, because you have someone come in and you sit there and they're telling you all their symptoms. They're telling you all these things that are going on. And I'm kind of nodding my head, because to me, Clay Webb sounds like a guy in a script that I've heard several times before. I've heard it from some of Sam Pittman's biggest commitments about the things that they valued about Georgia, they valued about their possible fit in the offensive line room. It sounds a lot like something I've heard before from a lot of guys. And I guess Dog Nation and everybody will be very eager to see what that decision will be.
I think that's really interesting. A lot of comments coming in on Clay Webb. Let me try to deal with a few of these. On YouTube, William Lee says that what he's hearing is that Clemson is out of the running for Clay Webb. And the reason why I bring that up is it is hard to deny there has been some online chatter coming from like the Clemson message boards, a little more negative about their chances with Webb over the last 24 hours or so. Now listen, Jeff, I do this to you all the time. I'm always throwing those online rumors at you. Some of these things prove to be true, some of them don't, but I think that William Lee is probably correct in saying that some of the Clemson message boards have kind of taken a more negative turn about Webb over the last 24 hours. I don't know if that means good news for Alabama or good news for Georgia. I don't think it means anything for Auburn, frankly. But I mean, it is hard to deny that there has been some sort of more negative chatter about Clemson as of late.
Yeah, there's good reporters out there, and I think their mission, and they're supposed to feed their audience, they're supposed to feed their subscribers and feed their boards. And the last thing anybody would want to do is, kind of reflect negative information, because I think folks, and I think your consumer, I think your audience remembers that. And it's very interesting. You can kind of, Brandon, it's just so hard, especially for a guy like me that tries to still kind of make my kids know who I am, and they remember my first name is Jeff, and they don't give me the evil eye when I come home sometimes, or when I come out of my office.
Wait, your kids call you Jeff?
No.
Were you Atticus Finch?
No, sometimes they say when they don't see me enough, they start using terms like Jeff from Dog Nation rather than Dad.
I see. I understand.
And that does twist in the knife of the old heart there a little bit. But, to me, I just kind of sometimes just try to stick to what I know, stick to
I understand.
what my own reporting is, because otherwise you can kind of get lost in a fog trying to chase everything and do everything and follow up on everything. So, I would just say there's a lot of chatter about Clay Webb, and Clay Webb is kind of going to be the anti-recruit for a lot of people. This show so far we've mentioned kind of reaffirming statements from guys like Bill Norton, reaffirming statements from Zion Logue, reaffirming statements from, there's also, that out there right now with Ryan Trouble Davis as well, which I'm sure we'll probably get to. But like Clay Webb is the next guy on the block, and everybody wants to know, does Georgia have a shot? Does Georgia have a shot? And maybe it doesn't happen that way on a football field. It doesn't happen that way in down Northside Drive
Yeah.
in Atlanta right now. But right now, Georgia fans feel a little bit better about getting in the ring on a recruiting battle with Alabama than the on-field battles.
Well, James Bryant in our Facebook comment section said getting Webb out of Alabama would be historic. A lot of other commenters have said something much the same way, and I think that historic is not too strong of a word to use. This is a player that Alabama wants from Alabama State. Oxford High School is a school that supplied Alabama with a lot of talent in the past, and when we're on the air on video live at 11 a.m. on Monday, if Webb does choose UGA, and I think the relationship with Pittman, Kibo Weir was saying, if Georgia gets Webb, you got to give Pittman some sort of promotion or something like that. He would certainly deserve something because this may be Pittman's finest hour in terms of winning a recruiting battle where I think that Georgia at the beginning would have had to have been considered a decided point spread underdog.
Yeah, and I think the thing that sticks out to me just as an evaluator of players rather than the hat dance and everything else like that is, to me, Georgia's continued pursuit of Clay Webb is very interesting because he is that rare prospect that I think kind of breaks the mold of the Georgia offensive lineman. And what I mean by that is if you look at a lot of Georgia's targets under Sam Pittman, they've been big guys. Not even the interior guys, but like they've just been big. They are usually over 300 pounds, or at least 6'4" or so, 6'3.5". I think Trey Webb is not quite Trey Hill is not quite 6'4". But we know with Webb, I think Webb dropped about 20 pounds this year in high school so he could move around better. He was at a guard at some point for Oxford, and then he was at tackle again for the state playoff chase for Oxford as well. And he's about 6'4", about 285 right now. That's a lighter offensive lineman for Georgia. So Sam Pittman and the staff must see something special in this young man for him to be kind of different than the mold. And one thing I want to make sure everybody catches with everyone's coverage when you follow Clay Webb is he's rated as a center. He's rated as a 5-star recruit. But one of the ways Georgia has able to maybe establish a foothold and some sort of base foundation in his recruitment is they kind of look at him as a guard early on. And that's what Clay Webb wants to be early on. He wants to be a guard. Rated as a center, and maybe that 6'4", 285 feels more like a center than a guard, especially in Georgia's offense. But right now, he's told me several times that what he's looking for is guard early, let him bite off that kind of piece of the steak right now. Let him get acclimated to that and guard, weight room, college life, getting better, getting on the field, playing, understanding the speed of the game. And then he realizes how complicated center is, and then he would want to tackle that later on in his career if his team needs him to do that.
No doubt Webb is one of Georgia's top remaining targets on the board for 2019. Let's check on the rest of the guys on that list right now here on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger as we take a look at those priorities that still remain for Georgia as it tries to lock up this 2019 class. Hazelwood we've discussed. Webb we've also just discussed. In between all of that, you got the defensive backs, Tyreek Stevenson, Kyrie Elam, both from South Florida. Elam's going to have to wait for a while. That's not until February that he'll make his decision. Then Nakobe Dean, Noah Kane. Dean, the 5-star linebacker. Kane, the 4-star running back. Two names we really haven't mentioned on today's show. Jeff, any update on anything from these sort of interior names beyond Hazelwood and Webb, which we've talked about? The defensive backs, Dean the linebacker, Kane the running back. Any update on any of those guys you want to provide?
Well, I guess going back to the board, I think a lot of these guys will make their decisions a couple of days in advance of their choices, and maybe they'll quietly alert the schools so schools can go to other Plan B targets. One of the things about Nakobe Dean I find interesting is he'd always wanted to commit on December the 13th, which was his birthday, and he decided to back that up to December 19th. He's got his own event there at Horn Lakes High School. State championship, by the way, home of a new Class 6A Mississippi State champion.
Good job, Nakobe.
He even knocked off Georgia commitment John Rice Plumlee
Good game,
in the
by the way.
6A state championship game. I wonder how Georgia fans regarded that. Were they rooting for the 5-star linebacker over the 4-star quarterback commit, or were they just happy with any sort of outcome? But the thing, getting back to the Dean says I've been told that Dean still plans to make his decision on the 13th. And the world's just going to find out on the 19th.
All right, so that's pretty interesting news there. It's Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. That's Jeff Sintel. I'm Brandon Adams. Speaking of Kroger right now, they've got 3 times the fuel points for you when you buy select meat and seafood like pork back ribs or Kroger shrimp. It's at your local Kroger. You can download the coupon from the app, and you can start saving today. All right, we've got our six-pack coming up. We'll do a Kroger How About Them Groceries $50 gift card giveaway with our hurry up before we're done here. A couple other items I want to get to before we get to that, Jeff. One of those involves Kirby Smart, seen in home last night with the four-star defensive back, DJ Daniel. Now, this is sort of tangibly interesting in terms of, what Georgia may still feel like it needs to do with some work on DJ Daniel after he recently committed to Georgia, kind of flipping away from South Carolina. But as you see this photo here, this is also kind of an interesting window into the world when it comes to recruiting. And pre-social media, we wouldn't get a chance to see a lot of this kind of stuff. These pictures would never become public. Last year, I even remember seeing the video of Rick Sandage showing Kirby Smart in the midst of that in-home visit with Sandage. Ultimately, Sandage chose South Carolina. But nonetheless, I do love this opportunity to see the casual nature of these in-home visits and see all this kind of stuff. I'm sure there's some sort of tangible news when it comes to, the whatever work needed to be done with DJ Daniel. I just like seeing some evidence of the in-home visits. That's a cool thing about Twitter and Instagram and stuff like that.
You like looking live, like Brent
I do.
Musburger said.
I like the fly on the wall type stuff.
So if we can go back to that Twitter picture. First of all, there is a hilarious thread on the Dog Nation forum where folks are talking about it, and it's everything from the decorations. Now, first of all, number one, that's got to be 5-star interior decorations.
Yeah, beautifully
right there.
decorated home.
I mean, the only thing that I've seen
Beautiful.
decorated as articulately might have been the sets on Home Alone.
Yeah,
because
really nice.
Those things are so Christmassy, right? But folks are having fun with it. They're looking over there in the corner. They're looking at a picture frame. They're looking at the guy in the mirror over the mantle that's taking the picture. And there's even someone on our forum, I think it was tweeted to me, how they scrolled down and saw what Kirby Smart's shoes looked like. I mean, people, when you take a picture these days, you don't think it's going to be scrutinized like that.
I know it, man. It's tough.
But I mean, then people are like, "Can DJ Daniel be a little bit more happy on social media?"
No, you got to give that's sort of like the mean mug look, right? I mean, sometimes you got to give the big smile, but every now and then you got to be all business. I don't have a problem with the look on DJ Daniel's face right there. I think that's an all business look from Daniel. I don't mind that.
He's an all business guy. He's going to come in. He's going to be an early enrollee as a junior college guy at Georgia Military. I think he has a chance to immediately jump into the top 3 in the cornerback discussion for Georgia. DeAndre Baker goes to the NFL and millions of dollars. Eric Stokes, Tyson Campbell, Devon Wilson maybe, DJ Daniel. Somebody's going to have to cover all those Alabama receivers.
And what we also know, and that's a really good point, Georgia's got to stay deep at defensive back. It needs a lot of those for this 2019 class. We also know, based on some of the stuff that Daniel's told you in the past, that in-home visit from Kirby Smart is an example of something that Daniel already said he liked about Georgia. Smart's ability and Smart's staff's ability to develop relationships with players. That was one of the things that drew Daniel to the program to begin with. Here is Daniel with you recently, which certainly helps shed some light on the nature of that in-home visit last night. Let's go back to the recent past to hear from DJ Daniel.
What's the best thing you like about Georgia?
Just the love, the communication, not just with me. They talk more to my family than me. So I just know it's just love there and just being straightforward to me.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, that's the nature of visits like that, and I think that Smart's very good at developing those kinds of relationships.
And I know most people think that one of the things that Coach Smart does very well is he controls the narrative. He stays ahead of news cycles, or he's right on top of news cycles trying to squash them. This is an example with all this imminent news of Mel Tucker going to Colorado, and it seems like only hours away, or it's coming, folks. It's just the way it's going to work. But get in there with that key defensive back commit, and Mel Tucker recruits defensive backs. Dan Lanning has been recruiting DJ Daniel for the longest of times, and that's a way. Use these in-home visits, and he even tweets out it's official as well, which is like, okay, folks. Georgia losing Mel Tucker will not cause me to veer away from Georgia in this instance.
All right, before we do our weekly six-pack, let's take care of one more piece of news. Obviously, if you follow college football, you know about the recent retirement of Ohio State coach Urban Meyer. Now, the wake of Meyer leaving Columbus has also led a couple of recruits to rethink their process. One of those is the 4-star 2020 safety for the class of 2020. guess I only need to say 2021. It's Legend Cavazos from IMG Academy. Let me show you, as you just saw, Cavazos' message on social media about that, explaining that he's opening things back up. There are some rumors out there that the Ohio State coaches have already kind of reached back out to him, trying to make him feel better about the situation. But the big news here is that Cavazos, a one-time heavy UGA target, is now decommitting from Ohio State. I would imagine that Jeff George was probably already still heavily involved with Cavazos, despite the fact that he committed to Ohio State. And I'm guessing they're going to turn up the heat even more right now. Cavazos was a guy that Georgia once wanted. My guess is they still very much do.
Yeah, so Legend, first of all, when he says please respect his decision, first of all, that is an immaculate decommitment letter. I mean, that's one of those where you learn a lot about a kid, how they react or how they present themselves in those sort of decommitment letters. It was clear that it meant something to him. The relationship to Urban Meyer meant something to him, and he articulated it very well. So with Georgia and Cavazos, I think Georgia, I'm pretty clear on this, that Georgia finished second to Ohio State. And the reason why Georgia finished second to Ohio State was that his father and his family have known Urban Meyer for more than 20, 25 years. When Urban Meyer was recruiting for other schools, when his father was a high school football coach in Texas, he got to know Urban very well. When Urban was an assistant, he was that guy. Man, imagine Urban Meyer as a recruiter on the road. That seems like so long ago. But he got to know them very well, and they felt very comfortable at Ohio State, among many things, but chiefly it was the chance to play for Coach Meyer. That said, he was still, later this fall, he still wanted to be sure. He still wanted to take a visit to Georgia. And he was planning to take an unofficial visit to Georgia late in the season, and that got something came up, so that plans got changed. But he was still planning to come back to Georgia. Now I think this decision opens things up a little bit. I think it opens things up to maybe Ohio State, Georgia, and Oregon. Those were his, the schools he felt most comfortable with before he made his decision. I think it was over the summer. So with Legend Cavazos, here's what probably needs to happen. Georgia needs to find their long-term defensive backs coach, might be their defensive coordinator. They need to figure out who would coach Cavazos. And then at that time, I think Georgia's going to get a very important visit from Legend Cavazos and his family, trying to figure out if that's the new move for him and his family.
Another name that some Georgia fans may recognize, Jake Ray, another 2020 offensive lineman. He decommits from Ohio State as well. Max Ray was a one-time UGA commit for the class of 2018. Is that right? Ray was a 2018 commit?
Ooh, no, 2018. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, 2018. He ends up at Ohio State, but Jake Ray decommits. I never got the impression that Georgia was really all that much in on Jake Ray to begin with. This doesn't feel like a scenario that's going to impact Georgia that much one way or another.
Yeah, I think not so much. And I'm glad we put that in the show, not because we want to mislead people about Jake Ray, Georgia, there's a shot. I think what this means is Jake Ray was one of the key Pied Pipers in the class of 2020, which Ohio State was building. Now, their 2019 class was down, but their 2020 class was off to a robust start. They were making moves. I think Ohio State was trying to put together a mega class, which is what Georgia has done the past few years, but there's still out there names like Kendall Milton, Elias Ricks, five-star corner, five-star running back, Mikhail Sherman, five-star outside linebacker out of D.C., Brian Brzee, the guy out of Damascus, Maryland.
Now, people in the Dog Nation Daily message board, or the comment section, have started calling him Luca Brasi, a reference to the great Godfather character. We've got some of that going on in the comment section now.
So there's Paris Johnson. There's a lot of guys that they were trying to build together. Justin Rogers was a guy who's like Georgia for the longest time, but Ohio State was a chief competitor. So now what you see is maybe some of the foundations of the 2020 class, guys like Legend Cavazos, guys like Jake Ray, unraveling a little bit. And I think that bodes well for all of college football, including Georgia, who are trying to take advantage of the Ohio State Buckeyes losing one of the iconic coaches in college football.
All right, before we give away our Kroger $50 How About Them Groceries gift card with our Hurry Up segment, let's do what we do every week, and it's one of my favorite things. It is our Pick Six, or I always call it the Pick Six. It's the six-pack. The Pick Six is something completely different, some other show. The six-pack is Jeff's questions, our answers. He tries to stump us. And, after what happened on Saturday, I can only imagine what the theme of these are going to be.
So, six-pack, I think, can we call this the hangover edition of the Dog Nation?
I need a hangover cure at this point in time.
Dog Nation challenge, 6 questions. And, again, what we try to do is we try to get a Brandon to ring the bell or Brandon to get a buzz. Buzzer means he did not answer the question accurately. And all right, Sport, first off, before we go, what do you think the theme is for this one? Is it a...
Please don't make it be worst losses in Georgia history. Please don't do that.
We're not going to do that one.
Thank you.
We're not going to do that one.
Thank you.
We're not going to do that one.
Thank you.
Let's just jump right into it.
right.
I know Brandon is eager to win something this week, to finish the drill on something this week. Let's go in our weekly six-pack. We're going to call it our hangover edition.
All right.
Number one, Alabama, Georgia, and heartbreak. These are familiar themes. In their 8 meetings with the Bulldogs this century, what percentage of the quarters has Alabama led?
I'm sure it's probably really, really low. I'm going to say 33% D.
33%.
Now, the 2015 game obviously was all Alabama, but the 2012 game, Georgia led for a while. And obviously we know the stats around the 2017, or I should say the 2018, the 2 games that played in the 2018 calendar year. We know what those were. Those were all Georgia. So it couldn't have been more than 33%.
So it's funny how things get buried. Georgia in 2003 actually opened up a 37-0 lead on Alabama, which at the time was the biggest biggest deficit Alabama had ever faced. But now when Georgia and Alabama comes up in first halves, everybody remembers the black jersey game.
Yeah.
The one that eventually was 31-0, and it eventually became 41-30.
Yeah.
But Georgia has actually somehow found a way to win 3 games out of those 8 against Alabama this century. And if we go to the numbers, I'm sure everybody in YouTube has had enough time to respond. Everybody on Facebook has had enough time to respond.
Brian Skelton says B. Georgia Peach says B. That's the 28% number. I guess I wasn't thinking about 2003 or even 2007. Oh, that was an overtime game. I was actually in Tuscaloosa for that game. I'm sticking with D just because I don't feel like changing my answer.
You were in Tuscaloosa. I'm sure you were watching the game, right?
Yeah, I went to the game.
Yeah, you say you're in Tuscaloosa. I'm like, are you eating wings at a bar?
No, I went to the game in 2007. I saw Mikey Henderson catch the touchdown pass.
So Mikey Henderson caught the touchdown, and obviously it was another 26-23 score. But the answer for that one, and those folks were right on it, B, 28%.
Nice job. Ty Jackson also got B as well. So I get buzzed. Rob Hicks, though, you get it correct, and some of our YouTube commenters got that correct as well. So congratulations to all of you.
So think about that. Georgia and Alabama have played 8 times this century, and Georgia has led 72% of the time.
Yeah.
That's all that needs to be said there. That's Brandon's sad face, by the way.
Is it all that needs to be said?
That's Brandon's.
Somehow that doesn't feel like it's all that needs to be said.
Well, to some
that
of
doesn't feel like the last word on that topic.
So obviously, Brandon didn't want the worst losses in Georgia history. So
I really don't.
Let's move on to number 2.
I
Brandon,
really don't.
Brandon gets to go 0 for 2. Of course, everyone is gnashing their teeth about a rematch in 2019. What do the returning starters look like for those teams among players who do not have draft eligibility after this season? So how many started in that game? What does that picture look like for both Georgia and Alabama? A, Alabama 11, Georgia 9. B, Georgia 12, Alabama 11. C, Georgia 12, Alabama 8.
That's a good question.
D, Alabama 13, Georgia 13. If you smart folks realize what we're doing, I want you to already think about that next time the Bulldogs get in the ring with Alabama.
This is a good question. I'm going to say the answer is C, 12 dogs, 8 from Bama.
12 dogs, 8 from Bama.
Josh Abernathy agrees. So does Chad Clark.
Jump in
over here on YouTube. Army Dog Charlie and Tyler Stoller also agree with me, although K9 Blues and Don P have taken D. Georgia Peach, who got the first one right, also agrees with me on this as well. So I think it's 12 Georgia, 8 Alabama, whatever letter that was, C or whatever.
Checking.
Frank Crowder says A, though.
Checking the numbers. Let's take a look. Everybody got their answers in. I'll give you another 4 or 5 seconds to make sure you can see how good you are at 6 packs.
Give me the answer. Come on.
Let's go to the board. The correct answer is A.
God damn it.
Alabama. You got to remember they have 7. They have 7 sophomores that started on offense for them in that game, and they also, which includes Tagovailoa and the entire receiving core.
Now, why don't you put a negative stat like that up?
That's not negative. Well, how's that negative? That's really close. 11. See, it's going to be another one of those things every year.
Now, I guess the other thing to think about here, though, is like for like draft eligible players, a lot of those draft eligible Georgia guys will choose to come back. But
a lot of those, and the way I pulled that out is there's a lot of draft eligible Alabama players who probably will not come back because they've experienced a lot of success in their college.
You're not helping right now. If you don't mind me saying so, you're not helping.
I'm not. Onward and upward. Number three. We're gonna give them some Chick-fil-A, as you like to say.
Right.
We're gonna give them some fun. 6-pack trivia.
All right.
Which program played more freshmen on Saturday, Georgia or Alabama? A, Georgia. B, Alabama. C, they played the same amount. Or D, the officiating crew definitely played more freshmen.
I appreciate that for you, for the effort there for D. I am going to assume that Georgia played more freshmen. I'm going to say the answer to this question is A.
Answer to your question is A. Do you think
Van Burnett agrees as well.
You think I've been playing 4D chess with our six-pack by
Yeah.
giving you negative, 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 and then I'm trying to...
Chadwick Ivory, Brian Skelton both say A as well. Jay Bolton says A. BA's daddy in a Facebook on the YouTube comment section says A. Christopher White, Brian Adams says A. Jacob Thompson also says it's Georgia. Dennis Wilson does as well. So that is the scenario.
No D's? Nobody responded with D?
Somebody had a couple of D's. P-Man 127, Gregory Glaves, they said D.
See, I knew Brandon would be depressed by this part of the six-pack, this third edition of the six-pack, so I tried to give a little bright. Looking at the answer,
There you go.
Brandon.
Nice job.
The answer is A.
Nice
But
job.
again, Georgia played 14 freshmen. Alabama played 12.
Nice
to me, that's just right there. Those two teams are just right there.
There you go. There you go.
Georgia's playing more freshmen. Going forward to the fourth one. You think this is all Alabama?
I hope not.
You hope not. I do know my audience very well. Number 4. We're going to go ahead and start. We do this every week.
Oh, there you go. Now we're talking. Let's turn the page here. Talk about Texas.
Brandon is now living up to the 72-hour rule, right?
Yeah.
We do this every week. Texas is up next. What is the ratio of elite prospects, 4 and 5 stars, that each of these teams has signed since 2015?
Let me just say this. Texas is higher than y'all think. Texas has been the best recruiting program in the Big 12 for a couple of years now, Oklahoma included.
A, Georgia 67, Texas 55. B, Texas 71, Georgia 67. C, Georgia 67, Texas 49. D, Georgia 67, Texas 40. Or E, Jeff's just trying to be funny there. Okay, cool. Hook 'em.
I do like the reference to Tom Herman's recent text to, what's his name, Zach Smith. I believe this is 67-49. I don't quite believe that Texas is above that 50% threshold, but they have recruited pretty well. I believe they are at 49%, if I had to guess. That's about, if you didn't give me any hint and you just asked for my number about what I thought it would be, 49 is about what I thought it would be for Texas. But this is percentage of former 4 and 5 star recruits on the Texas roster. I'd say 49, 67-49.
So,
That's what other people are saying.
Everybody hop in on YouTube.
Nathan Mosley says A. Terrence Eberhard says 67-55. Brandon Lee Grant says B. Robbie Halloway says I can't even believe we're talking about Texas. Shaking my head. I understand where you're coming from on that one. Sam Kirkland says B. Scott Pete says turn those hooks down. That is a horns down situation. Gregory. So it's 67-49 is what I think.
You think it's 67-49? Will Brandon be horns down or horns up on this one right here? What has he got? World.
Oh no, so 55. Texas is even a little bit better than I thought.
Texas
I mean,
is a little bit.
you don't see too many Big 12 teams that ever have much more than 40% of former 4 and 5 star players. Like Oklahoma does fairly well with the offensive side of the ball, but that's not a great recruiting program, really.
They had a bad year, I think, a couple of years where they had the transition in the coaching staff.
Yeah, they did. So 55%. I mean, Texas. That's a pretty talented roster.
And actually, the numbers, I want to make sure, you said it a couple times, so I just want to make you very clear. It's actually 67 and 55 actual numbers, not percentages.
That's percentages, that's right.
So Georgia actually has 67.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
They have 67 players to 55.
Yeah, I apologize on that. That's right. So percentage-wise, I may actually still be right.
You know, I'm not.
Because Georgia's percentage is also somewhere around 69% or so.
Correct. And the other thing, we're not going to kick the tires too hard on that, is that these schools usually sign about 25 players every year.
Yeah.
So that's what it looks like right
So
now.
percentage-wise, I may be close to right. I apologize.
You might be pretty close to right. So Brandon, horns down.
Chad
on that
Clark
one.
is also yelling at me. There aren't percentages, BA. I know. I am now aware of that. I was not aware of that a couple of minutes ago. I'm now aware of that.
Forgive him, world. The team he pulls for has suffered a tragic loss over the last few days.
That's right.
Another one. Let's move on. Brandon.
We got some breaking news here. Okay, so Bruce Feldman from The Athletic is reporting that Mel Tucker, the brand new Colorado coach, will not coach for Georgia in the Sugar Bowl against Texas on New Year's Day.
And
so
the news has been finalized by Colorado.
And that news is finalized by Colorado. Thank you very much, Connor Riley, breaking in to give us that. So Tucker will not coach for Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. If this was a college football playoff game, almost certainly Tucker would have stuck around. That's what Jeremy Pruitt did at Alabama. That's what Kirby Smart did at Alabama. Being the Sugar Bowl, I see no reason why Mel Tucker needs to coach this game. I wish him well. Best of luck over there in Boulder, Colorado. Georgia will find a new defensive coach to lead the game plan against Texas. That's not a huge surprise for me, nor do I have any reason to criticize that decision.
Are you worried about Mel Tucker coming after Georgia recruits for Colorado?
No, I am not.
Class of 2019.
No, I am not.
We had a breaking news. Wasn't that
Yeah.
exciting? It was like in the middle of a six-pack, we got our six-pack got interrupted.
Frank Crowder says, will Mel Tucker take anybody with him? That is obviously an interesting question. For the most part, I don't even expect Tucker to take anybody of significant consequence with him either.
Maybe one of Georgia's analysts, maybe one of Georgia's GAs if they're not promised.
Now, I don't want to lose any of them either, but this is a situation where, I think that Georgia's coaches for the most part are up-and-coming guys, and I think obviously being a part of what is still a rocket ship at Georgia is obviously a better career path to be on. With all due respect to Mel Tucker, who may be a very good coach at Colorado, that is very much an unknown situation, given the fact that Mike McIntyre was at one point in time undefeated about halfway through the season. He got fired later on. So that's a little bit of a less than firm footing to put yourself on if you go out to Boulder. If I'm a young up-and-coming coach, that's not where I want to be.
I will say this: Mel Tucker will probably bring some pass defense and some defense to the Pac-12 and everything else. When you got him going to the Buffaloes, he'll definitely put some pressure on guys and coach up some defensive backs. And you asked me that question. I think people were getting on it. I wonder if a really quality guy like Nick Williams, who's a Georgia analyst, who works with the defensive backs, or even Bakari Rambo.
Bakari Rambo's a name to think about.
Those guys might even go with him as maybe defensive analyst or some sort of graduate coaches as well.
Also, like an offensive analyst like a Jay Johnson that's not currently a position coach. Does he get a chance to be a coordinator, something like that? He was Minnesota coordinator before. What's his name got fired?
True. So can we get back to our six-pack now?
Well, yeah, we probably need to.
That's funny. We had a six-pack break. So, okay, break time's over. We're going to go back to our six-pack. What do you think the next question's about, sir?
I don't even know.
It's not
Texas, maybe?
It's not about Mel Tucker. Let's jump back into Texas. I think we were on 5.
This is 5. Yeah.
Number 5 for Brandon Adams. Let's hook him with more Texas questions. Which prospects on the commitment list did Georgia beat out Texas for in this cycle?
So I would say Lewis Seen is going to be one of those. I would say that Noah Cain has a chance to be another one of those, assuming that Cain chooses Georgia. Who else is out there that Georgia would have beaten out Texas for? I'm thinking about Cain. I'm thinking about Seen. Somebody y'all help me in the comment section. Philip Sharp gives me Seen. Philip, that's a good answer. I already had that one. Winston Mock has that one as well. Anybody else have any of the others besides Seen and potentially Cain?
There's one clear name. He took one of his official visits before his decision.
Maurice Carter going back to the 2017 class, or I should say the 2018 class, with a Tommy Bush. Drew Roman is suggesting Micaiah Tongue. That's an interesting name. I think of Georgia as having beaten out LSU for him, but nonetheless. Kyle Norton mentions J.R. Reed transferring. That's his home state, I guess, although he was most recently at Texas. Well, everybody's just saying the same names over and over.
Yeah, so one of them, had one that I think probably deserves to be in this answer here. I would have accepted, obviously, Lewis Seen. Took his official visit there. He's from Texas. Well, he's boarding school in Texas.
There now,
Number 2, the name that everybody kind of picked up on was Micaiah Tongue. Micaiah Tongue came down to Texas and Arizona State among his finalists. But the other one, probably maybe
Ryan
more
Davis. How about that?
Trouble Davis. He's a guy that I think he's going to take his official visit now to Georgia. The official visit that was planned to Alabama now not going to happen for Trouble Davis.
Right, so say that one more time. Davis was heavily rumored to take a visit to Alabama, but you're saying what now?
Not going to happen, not going to take his official visit to Alabama. He is also going to enroll early at Georgia.
There you go.
That's we got so much stuff going on. I apologize if I can't get to all of it.
I will say, though, that as much as I don't love seeing Georgia commits taking visits, I was kind of cheering for him to go take an official visit to Arizona State. That'd be fun.
You want to take an official? You want Georgia to play Arizona State in a home and home?
Go back to Tempe, Arizona again? That's not a bad place to go. Although if I'm going to go 2,000 miles, I want to play a real team. But
Number 6.
Question number 6.
Number 6, and the longest six-pack in history. Might have been the longest some of those six-packs after the Georgia-Alabama game. Seen stands to become a Bulldog from the state of Texas. Name any 2 Bulldogs the program has signed out of Texas this century.
This century, Texans. Tommy Bush would be one.
Correct. Somebody jogged your memory on that.
No, I said Tommy Bush myself. Who else is from Texas? Texas. Don't mess with Texas. Y'all help me out here. I don't know why I'm blanking on some of these. Let me go over to YouTube, see if anybody over there. Oh, yeah, J.R. Reed, Matt Stafford would have been a good one from Highland Park. That's a really good one. Brian Adams also saying that as well. Brian Skelton as well. Tyler Stoller saying that. Why did I not think about Matthew Stafford? Everybody's saying that. So, yeah, that's what we got. We got Stafford. We got J.R. Reed. Everybody's saying Stafford. Obviously, Tommy Bush.
Tommy Bush, Matt Stafford, J.R. Reed, all those are acceptable answers, but I was going to be very impressed. Might have even given away a gift card if somebody would have known. 2002, Dale Dixon.
I don't even know who that is.
The strong side defensive end who chose Georgia in 2002.
Okay, yeah, okay. Dixon is a name that I've kind of forgotten about, but there you go.
Didn't have a great career at Georgia, obviously, if he doesn't show up in your cortex.
Tim Joyner says Torrin Kurtzy's from Texas. Is that true? Kurtzy was also not this century. He was late 90s.
Yeah. And, there's some bold. And obviously, I mean, people could have gotten, people remember Tennille Carter as a guy that committed to Georgia, would probably be at Georgia right now.
Devois Whaley, too. Almost had him as well.
Yeah.
One-time Georgia commit.
People wonder about Georgia and Texas. Well, they've actually had better success than most might think in Texas.
There you go. All right, so that is our six-pack. We do it every single week. This week, maybe not quite as fun given the mood a lot of Georgia fans are in, but Jeff did his part to make us feel better about that. Now let's see if we can keep that happy vibe, the momentum going, as we try to give away a $50 Kroger How About Them Groceries gift card. We call it our hurry up. We try to get as many questions in over the course of the 5-minute period. So if you've been dying to know anything, as we get close to early signing period beginning, this is the time to get those questions answered. Can we get 5 minutes on the clock? And let's also try to count to see how many of these have we've done. We can do. Is 17 still our record? Surely we've done more than 17 in 5 minutes by now. Have we broken 20 yet? 17 still the record. Can we see if we can get 20 today, Jeff?
Let's do it.
All right, here we go. On your mark, get set, go. Let's dive in and get as many of these questions as we possibly can. Gregory Glaves says, will Jake Fromm break any Aaron Murray records?
No.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Brian Adams says, chances Clay Webb goes to Georgia.
Stay tuned.
Jacob Thompson says, wasn't Herman the guy who said Texas players signing with SEC teams was a fad? Do you remember that at all?
Do not remember that. Clarity on.
Hold on, you got to give me more than stay tuned for Clay Webb. That just went in and went in and out the other. You got to give me more than that.
I would say I was thinking about my first answer. The reason why I don't think Jake Fromm will break Aaron Murray's records is I don't know if he will play 4 seasons at Georgia.
Well, still, Murray's records are untouchable. Indy Clip 87 says, who's the new defensive coordinator going to be?
A lot of names. Derek Ansley. You hear names like Kevin Shearer. You hear names like maybe Dan Lanning, maybe Glenn Schumann. All those guys are worthy candidates. The thing you keep hearing, though, is Kirby's got a list of Coach Smart has a list of guys he looks for that probably he's worked with in the past. Worked with in the past usually means that they know the Nick Saban coaching tree of defense. So I would be surprised if it goes outside of familiarity.
K9 Blue says, when will Tramel Walthor enroll? Obviously, the 2018 signee.
Yeah, he's the 3-star out of Liberty County, Hinesville, through junior college in Kansas. It seems to me like that situation has always been a mirror situation to what Devontae Wyatt did.
Brian Adams says, if Darnell Wright were to join this class, the 5-star offensive lineman, offensive tackle from West Virginia, would Xavier Truss still have room for him?
I think so. I think Georgia, folks, we've talked about this a little bit. I don't know, so many places we put our coverage now, but look at the way Isaiah Wilson played. Look at the way Andrew Thomas played. There is a stark reality that both of those guys might be welcome to the NFL after the 2019
Joe
season.
Brummel says the probability that Kyrie Elam would choose Georgia given Mel Tucker's departure.
I think Mel Tucker was big for Kyrie Elam, especially because he had that NFL experience. His father played 8 and 9 seasons in the NFL. I think Georgia needs to. I think this is going to work good for Georgia in terms of Kyrie Elam's not going to make his decision until February. He's going to not even take his officials until January. I think that's good because Georgia will need to have that guy in place certainly well in advance.
Chadwick Ivory says, who is the recruit we're talking about that we're not talking about that we should be?
Wow. that's a very open-ended question. Trying to get to 20.
You certainly talked a lot about Trezman Marshall in the past in terms of the impact that you think he can make. That was a guy that seemed to not be getting the love for a while.
And I didn't mean that. That was a very open-ended question, like who doesn't get enough love, or who's that guy that's hanging out like high-hanging fruit that Georgia has a shot at. Maybe a guy that's name's starting to pop up is Jordan Battle a little bit. I'm answering the question the way I think the most interested reader or listener would want to know. Jordan Battle is a 2019 Ohio State commit, and some people wonder whether those Ohio State commitments for 2019 will also come open.
Jeffrey Norton asking about Nadab Joseph. Is he still on the radar for Georgia? The 2018 defensive back signee who had to go the junior college route?
Very talented. He's at Independence Community College right now. He needed at least 18 months there to be eligible, so you got to classify him as a 2020 recruit. I think that young man needs to make sure that he advances in the classroom. Still a great player, though, and if Georgia signs him, he would not count because he's already counted once.
Drew Roman says, who's the Devad Wilson of this year, the surprise recruit? I guess also Nadab Joseph would have qualified as a surprise last year, too. You see the potential of that surprise out there?
I think, listen, this program does not like to go after JUCO guys unless they can come in and play right away. I think DJ Daniel and Jermaine Johnson are the ones that have the most upside that no one really talks about.
The P-Man 127 says, do you think Nada's going to leave or stay for 2019?
Good question. Depends on what comes back with his draft grade. I think if Nata decides to stay, then it's to improve his status, and man, that would help out Georgia a lot. But if he gets one of those grades if anybody gets a grade that's like first, second, third round, it might be hard to come back.
Tyler Stoller says, what about Deangelo Gibbs' future? Do you see a future for Gibbs at Georgia next season?
I still do, and I think it's funny. I think a lot of maybe some of his playing time is prevented by his cousin, J.R. Reed's so good. He stays on the field so long, and next year is going to be very interesting. This spring practice, 2019 spring practice, 2019 fall camp will be highly interesting for Deangelo Gibbs.
Billy Mitzi Sage says, what about Trey Sanders? Is Sanders still a possibility for Georgia?
Sanders, he is still making his official visits. He's one of those December 19 guys as well. Nation's #1 running back. Seems to me that Georgia is angling towards Noah Cain for specific reasons. Trey Sanders seems to be linked to Alabama, has been linked to Alabama for a while. I'd be very interesting to see if Trey Sanders takes another visit to Georgia.
Charles Kaiser says, which recruit do I want the most in this class? Charles, I will tell you that obviously I've talked most about Jaden Hazelwood. That doesn't change. When it comes to what I saw for Georgia against Alabama, Georgia's got to be better at stopping the run. That's why a guy like Nakobe Dean of those uncommitted prospects is still a big name for me.
Nolan, you got to think about them because that guy would get the heat on Jalen Hurts or Tua Tagovailoa, and give those receivers more time. I think the name that a lot of people should think about as well is, which one of those potential cornerbacks. DJ Daniel, we mentioned him earlier, but Trezman Marshall, Ryan Trouble Davis, he's also going to have to come back from a knee injury as well. That's somebody to think about. And again, Logan Mitchell and Trevon Walker, big names.
So how many questions did we get through? Does anybody know? 14? Is that all? Good gracious alive. All right, I want to give our $50 Kroger How About Them Groceries gift card to Billy and Mitzi Page, if you don't mind, for the Trey Sanders question, just because that's a different name than we've had a chance to kick around on today's show. It's also kind of a newer name for me in the comment section, so can we reward what might be a new viewer there?
I would sure you would love it, Brandon, if Georgia goes from Kenny McIntosh and DJ Williams to Noah Cain to Trey Sanders.
Yeah, I don't mind that at all. So we'll be in touch with you about your $50 Kroger How About Them Groceries gift card. We appreciate being here on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger today. Jeff, we appreciate good information from you on the program here today as well. Fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for that. We'll look forward to reading a lot from you at dognation.com coming up in the days ahead.
All right, guys. Take it easy.